This is the last video for chapter 1 of the book of Revelation, and we've only got a couple verses left, but hopefully some good discussion out of this one. I'm going to start with I'm going to back up to verse 17, even though we covered it in the last one. Just want to get our context. When I saw him, the great, powerful Jesus, who's not just being meek, or meekness means, it doesn't mean that you're weak, it means that you know when to show your strength. So the Jesus who's not just hiding his strength, he's not limiting himself, he shows his full strength. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, Fear not, I'm the first and the last, and the living one. I died, and behold, I'm alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Write therefore the things that you've seen, those that are, and those that are to take place after this. As for the mystery of the 7 stars you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are 7 churches. Thankfully, the weirdest metaphor we've had so far in the book of Revelation, like the metaphors we've had so far, like talking about Jesus' power, we can understand, okay, Jesus is really strong. But then there's this, he's standing in the middle of lampstands, and he's got stars, and what's going on with these things? It's our first we're going to dip our toes in the water of apocalyptic literature with weird metaphors. Thankfully, in verses 19 and 20, Jesus is just super kind to us and says, here's the meaning. But before we get to that meaning, I want to just recap a little bit of what we learned about Jesus so far, because this way of thinking about Jesus makes me think in some ways of one particular guy. He's one of the best people ever. He died not terribly long ago, but he's somebody who always made me think of God. I'm not saying I idolized him or anything, but he's somebody who really understood and had figured out his walk with Jesus. And he was my boss for a few years. I was his teaching assistant, and when I went to go meet with him, I was always terrified of going to go meet with him because I knew that he would see me and know that I could do a better job. I could manage my time better. I'm not living up to my full potential, and he's just gonna be very honest, and not in a mean way, but he's just gonna honestly talk about how I could be better. I mean, he's a good boss in that way, but also he's just a very loving person and wanted to see me do my best. But here's the cool thing about his love, is that when I came away from meeting with him, I felt awesome. Because it wasn't just a, you can do better, it's a, I'm inspired now to do better because of how he just talked to me and treated me and showed love to me in the way that he was just opened his heart. And it was just really cool. And I always imagine encounters with God like that, but on steroids. Where it's, we know we've fallen short, we know we can't live up. We're in this book of Revelation, chapter 1, we are meeting Jesus, unveiling his glory. We can't stand up to that. But Jesus puts his hand on John's shoulder and says, Fear not. I killed death for you. Now hold on. And we are going to be expected to hold on throughout the craziness that is the book of Revelation. Just remember those things. That's where we're coming from as we get into these next couple verses. So remember that Jesus, remember that powerful Jesus, who's not just super duper strong, but he also loves you dearly, died for you, is willing to suffer on your behalf. Someone who did not need to suffer at all, because he's stronger than all that, does for you. And says, Fear not. And then he tells us the meaning of the metaphors that have already happened so far. In there. As for the mystery of the 7 stars you saw in my right hand, the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. So Jesus is in the midst of the church. Before I get to the full implications of that, I'm going to back up. Verse 19 tells us that John was told to write the things that he's seen, and those that are, and those that are to take place after this. Things that are now, that are happening right now in John's day and age. Because remember, it was written in present tense 2,000 years ago about. And things that will take place after this. Which is why I'm going to push to say that a lot of the interpretation of this book needs to be near. If you watch the previous videos, I've already pushed that a little bit. But a lot of this book is stuff that's already happened, or it's immediate, or it's happening, and they're living through it. But I'm also not an idiot, and there's a lot of the book of Revelation that has not taken place yet. And so John's told here, things that are, and things that will take place in the future. So we've got that. And so some of the words, like how to interpret the book of Revelation, like preterism and historicism and futurism, those get thrown around. I don't put myself in any one of those four categories because I'm like, well, obviously, some of that has already happened because otherwise I'm calling God a liar. But then also we see things like, well, obviously, chapters 21 and 22 haven't happened yet. And so we got to take things as they come and discuss them and makes the best sense of the data we have as filtered through apocalyptic literature as we get through those things. So we're going to get through this. Also compare the verse I just read to verse 1, where it's things that must soon take place, and verse 3, for the time is near. The timeline of Revelation is going to be wonky, and we're going to get into that. And I think it's pretty obvious that the timeline of Revelation gets weird. One reason for that is I think the timeline is very cyclical, not just in a circle, but it's also going somewhere. It's not just that Eastern everything repeats mindset, but also not just the Western everything's going in one direction mindset. It's kind of a combination of both, where we are going somewhere, but while we get there, we're wrapping back around several times. And so I'm going to state that Revelation is now, and Revelation is now, and Revelation is what will be now, not yet now. So that's why I'm going to say, and to answer a previous question I asked you all, is the end times are now. The end times are now. I think that's blatantly what Scripture teaches. It's really obvious that Scripture teaches that the end times are now. In these last days are something that's said quite often. The last days is the time period in the New Testament, all the way up to today and into however long God lets the future go. But I don't say, oh, we're in the end times now, we're in the last days. I don't say that to scare you and to make you worried about Jesus coming back. Jesus coming back should be a good thing. I say that to say that a lot of the scary parts of the book of Revelation are just what it's like to live on this earth. There's some stuff that's greater than that, but a lot of Revelation is just like, hey, God understands what you're going through, and yeah, some of it's just very much plagues. Jesus puts his hand on you and says, fear not. He's there with you during these things. And the good news of Revelation is that Jesus is by your side, and it's going to be over soon. There's similar phrases to the things that are and the things that have already happened and things like that. They're very similar to Daniel chapter 2, verses 28 and verses 29 and 45. In fact, in some ancient translations of Daniel, the Greek is paralleled perfectly, which means that we're supposed to think of Daniel. And some of what Daniel alluded to was Jesus coming back. And so what's cool is this is another way of saying, hey, Daniel's prophecies about the end times and everything working out awesome, they're fulfilled in Jesus. Revelation's prophecies parallel in many ways Daniel's prophecies. So that's just a reminder that the book of Revelation has to be applicable to both the seven churches and to the modern churches and to all the churches in between. Now, what does that have to do with those stars and angels? So if it needs to be applicable to the seven churches, which Jesus says, that's the meaning of the metaphor. The seven lampstands that Jesus walks amongst are the churches. It's not just only those churches, though. It's all the churches in between up to the churches of today. Which means the metaphor that's explained to us is that this Jesus, who is super duper powerful, super amazing, who's not a puny God, who puts his hand on your shoulder and says, fear not, he walks amongst the churches. And so the big question for today is if lampstands means churches, and it does, this means that when you show up to church, Jesus is there. Which makes sense of other parts of Scripture, right? Where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, Jesus is there. So the big question, I already said it was the question, but here's the question. When you walk into a church building on Sunday morning and come face to face with Jesus' body, which according to many passages throughout the New Testament is Jesus' body is the gathering of believers, when you come face to face with Jesus, and you come face to face with communion, Jesus' broken body for you, and the gathering of the saints, Jesus' gathered body for you. When you show up at church, when you're getting ready for church, do you actually realize that the Jesus of Revelation chapter 1 is there with you? Do you react as though you're encountering someone powerful? When you gather with the church, do you come expecting to meet with Jesus? If not, reread Revelation chapter 1. Or realize gathering with the church is important because, as we said in the previous verses, you're probably going through some persecution and some tribulation. And you probably are needing some reason to be told to hang on, endure, have that endurance. So you probably need a reason to be reminded that you're a part of God's kingdom. And when you're looking forward to God's kingdom, it's really important to be friends with the one who's on the throne. He's scary to approach, but it's always worth it. That's the big deal that we get out of Revelation chapter 1. Encounter the powerful Jesus, because he's there and wants to be on your side. And in the next chapter, 2 chapters, he's going to have some words for those who encounter him. All right, thanks for watching this final video for week 2, chapter 1.